Chapter 27. The absorption of the French by Moscow, radiating starwise as it did, only reached the quarter where Pierre was staying by the evening of the 2nd of September. After the last 2 days spent in solitude and unusual circumstances, Pierre was in a state bordering on insanity. He was completely obsessed by one persistent thought. He did not know how or when this thought had taken such possession of him, but he remembered nothing of the past, understood nothing of the present, and all he saw and heard appeared to him like a dream. He had left home only to escape the intricate tangle of life's demands that enmeshed him, and which in his present condition he was unable to unravel. He had gone to Joseph Alexeyevitch's house, on the plea of sorting the deceased's books and papers, only in search of rest from life's turmoil, for in his mind the memory of Joseph Alexeyevitch was connected with a world of eternal, solemn, and calm thoughts, quite contrary to the restless confusion into which he felt himself being drawn. He sought a quiet refuge, and in Joseph Alexeyevitch's study he really found it. When he sat with his elbows on the dusty writing table in the death-like stillness of the study, calm and significant memories of the last few days rose one after another in his imagination, particularly of the Battle of Borodino and of that vague sense of his own insignificance and insincerity compared with the truth, simplicity, and strength of the class of men he mentally classed as they. When Gerasim roused him from his reverie, the idea occurred to him of taking part in the popular defense of Moscow which he knew was projected. And with that object he had asked Gerasim to get him a peasant's coat and a pistol, confiding to him his intentions of remaining in Joseph Alexeyevitch's house and keeping his name secret. Then during the first days spent in inaction and solitude, he tried several times to fix his attention on the Masonic manuscripts, but was unable to do so. The idea that had previously occurred to him of the Kabbalistic significance of his name in connection with Bonaparte's more than once vaguely presented itself. But the idea that he, Rus Besohov, was destined to set a limit to the power of the beast was as yet only one of the fancies that often passed through his mind and left no trace behind. When, having bought the coat merely with the object of taking part among the people in the defense of Moscow, Pierre had met the Rostovs and Natasha had said to him, "Are you remaining in Moscow?" How splendid, the thought flashed into his mind that it really would be a good thing, even if Moscow were taken, for him to remain there and do what he was predestined to do. Next day, with the sole idea of not sparing himself and not lagging in any way behind them, Pierre went to the Three Hills Gate. But when he returned to the house convinced that Moscow would not be defended, he suddenly felt that what before had seemed to him merely a possibility had now become absolutely necessary and inevitable. He must remain in Moscow, concealing his name, and must meet Napoleon and kill him, and either perish or put an end to the misery of all Europe, which it seemed to him was solely due to Napoleon. Pierre knew all the details of the attempt on Bonaparte's life in 1809 by a German student in Vienna, and knew that the student had been shot. And the risk to which he would expose his life by carrying out his design excited him still more. Two equally strong feelings drew Pierre irresistibly to this purpose. The first was a feeling of the necessity of sacrifice and suffering in view of the common calamity, the same feeling that had caused him to go to Mozhaysk on the 25th and to make his way to the very thick of the battle and had now caused him to run away from his home and, in place of the luxury and comfort to which he was accustomed, to sleep on a hard sofa without undressing and eat the same food as Gerasim. The other was that vague and quite Russian feeling of contempt for everything conventional, artificial, and human, for everything the majority of men regard as the greatest good in the world. Pierre had first experienced this strange and fascinating feeling at the Sloboda Palace, when he had suddenly felt that wealth, power, and life, all that men so painstakingly acquire and guard, if it has any worth has so only by reason of the joy with which it can all be renounced. It was the feeling that induces a volunteer recruit to spend his last penny on drink, and a drunken man to smash mirrors or glasses for no apparent reason and knowing that it will cost him all the money he possesses, the feeling which causes a man to perform actions which from an ordinary point of view are insane, to test, as it were, his personal power and strength, affirming the existence of a higher, non-human criterion of life. From the very day Pierre had experienced this feeling for the first time at the Sloboda Palace he had been continuously under its influence, but only now found full satisfaction for it. Moreover, at this moment Pierre was supported in his design and prevented from renouncing it by what he had already done in that direction. If he were now to leave Moscow like everyone else, his flight from home, the peasant coat, the pistol, and his announcement to the Rostovs that he would remain in Moscow would all become not merely meaningless but contemptible and ridiculous, and to this Pierre was very sensitive. Pierre's physical condition, as is always the case, corresponded to his mental state. The unaccustomed coarse food, the vodka he drank during those days, the absence of wine and cigars, his dirty unchanged linen, 2 almost sleepless nights passed on a short sofa without bedding, all this kept him in a state of excitement bordering on insanity. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The French had already entered Moscow. Pierre knew this, but instead of acting he only thought about his undertaking, going over its minutest details in his mind. In his fancy he did not clearly picture to himself either the striking of the blow or the death of Napoleon, but with extraordinary vividness and melancholy enjoyment imagined his own destruction and heroic endurance. Yes, alone, for the sake of all, I must do it or perish, he thought. Yes, I will approach, and then suddenly, with pistol or dagger. But that is all the same. It is not I but the hand of Providence that punishes thee, I shall say, thought he, imagining what he would say when killing Napoleon. Well then, take me and execute me, he went on, speaking to himself and bowing his head with a sad but firm expression. While Pierre, standing in the middle of the room, was talking to himself in this way, the study door opened and on the threshold appeared the figure of Makar Alexievich, always so timid before but now quite transformed. His dressing gown was unfastened, his face red and distorted. He was obviously drunk. On seeing Pierre he grew confused at first, but noticing embarrassment on Pierre's face immediately grew bold and, staggering on his thin legs, advanced into the middle of the room. They're frightened, he said confidentially in a hoarse voice. I say I won't surrender, I say. Am I not right, sir? He paused and then suddenly seeing the pistol on the table seized it with unexpected rapidity and ran out into the corridor. Gerasim and the porter, who had followed Makar Alexievich, stopped him in the vestibule and tried to take the pistol from him. Pierre, coming out into the corridor, looked with pity and repulsion at the half-crazy old man. Makar Alexievich, frowning with exertion, held on to the pistol and screamed hoarsely, evidently with some heroic fancy in his head. To arms! Board them! No, you shan't get it, he yelled. That will do, please, that will do. Have the goodness, please, sir, to let go. Please, sir, pleaded Gerasim, trying carefully to steer Makar Alexievich by the elbows back to the door. Who are you? Bonaparte, shouted Makar Alexievich. That's not right, sir. Come to your room, please, and rest. Allow me to have the pistol. Be off, thou base slave. Touch me not. See this? Shouted Makar Alexievich, brandishing the pistol. Board them. Catch hold, whispered Gerasim to the porter. They seized Makar Alexievich by the arms and dragged him to the door. The vestibule was filled with the discordant sounds of a struggle and of a tipsy, hoarse voice. Suddenly a fresh sound, a piercing feminine scream, reverberated from the porch and the cook came running into the vestibule. It's them. Gracious heavens! O Lord, 4 of them, horsemen, she cried. Gerasim and the porter let Makar Alexievich go, and in the now silent corridor the sound of several hands knocking at the front door could be heard. Chapter 28. Pierre, having decided that until he had carried out his design he would disclose neither his identity nor his knowledge of French, stood at the half-open door of the corridor, intending to conceal himself as soon as the French entered. But the French entered and still Pierre did not retire, an irresistible curiosity kept him there. There were 2 of them. One was an officer, a tall, soldierly, handsome man, the other evidently a private or an orderly, sunburned, short and thin, with sunken cheeks and a dull expression. The officer walked in front, leaning on a stick and slightly limping. When he had advanced a few steps he stopped, having apparently decided that these were good quarters, turned round to the soldiers standing at the entrance, and in a loud voice of command ordered them to put up the horses. Having done that, the officer, lifting his elbow with a smart gesture, stroked his mustache and lightly touched his hat. Bonjour, la compagnie. Asterisk, said he gaily, smiling and looking about him. Asterisk, good day, everybody. No one gave any reply. Vous êtes le bourgeois? Asterisk, the officer asked Gerasim. Asterisk, are you the master here? Gerasim gazed at the officer with an alarmed and inquiring look. Quartier, logement, said the officer, looking down at the little man with a condescending and good-natured smile. Les Français sont de bons enfants. Que diable. Voyons. Ne nous fâchons pas, mon vieux. Asterisk, added he, clapping the scared and silent Gerasim on the shoulder. Well, does no one speak French in this establishment? He asked again in French, looking around and meeting Pierre's eyes. Pierre moved away from the door. Asterisk, quarters, lodgings. The French are good fellows. What the devil? There, don't let us be cross, old fellow. Again the officer turned to Gerasim and asked him to show him the rooms in the house. Master, not here, don't understand, me, you, said Gerasim, trying to render his words more comprehensible by contorting them. Still smiling, the French officer spread out his hands before Gerasim's nose, intimating that he did not understand him either, and moved, limping, to the door at which Pierre was standing. Pierre wished to go away and conceal himself, but at that moment he saw Makar Alexievich appearing at the open kitchen door with the pistol in his hand. With a madman's cunning, Makar Alexievich eyed the Frenchman, raised his pistol, and took aim. Board them, yelled the tipsy man, trying to press the trigger. Hearing the yell, the officer turned round, and at the same moment Pierre threw himself on the drunkard. Just when Pierre snatched at and struck up the pistol, Makar Alexievich at last got his fingers on the trigger, there was a deafening report, and all were enveloped in a cloud of smoke. The Frenchman turned pale and rushed to the door. Forgetting his intention of concealing his knowledge of French, Pierre, snatching away the pistol and throwing it down, ran up to the officer and addressed him in French. You are not wounded? He asked. I think not, answered the Frenchman, feeling himself over. But I have had a lucky escape this time, he added, pointing to the damaged plaster of the wall. Who is that man? Said he, looking sternly at Pierre. Oh, I am really in despair at what has occurred, said Pierre rapidly, quite forgetting the part he had intended to play. He is an unfortunate madman who did not know what he was doing. The officer went up to Makar Alexievich and took him by the collar. Makar Alexievich was standing with parted lips, swaying, as if about to fall asleep as he leaned against the wall. Brigand! You shall pay for this, said the Frenchman, letting go of him. We French are merciful after victory, but we do not pardon traitors, he added, with a look of gloomy dignity and a fine energetic gesture. Pierre continued, in French, to persuade the officer not to hold that drunken imbecile to account. The Frenchman listened in silence with the same gloomy expression, but suddenly turned to Pierre with a smile. For a few seconds he looked at him in silence. His handsome face assumed a melodramatically gentle expression and he held out his hand. You have saved my life. You are French, said he. For a Frenchman that deduction was indubitable. Only a Frenchman could perform a great deed, and to save his life, the life of M. Rambaud, captain of the 13th Light Regiment, was undoubtedly a very great deed. But however indubitable that conclusion and the officer's conviction based upon it, Pierre felt it necessary to disillusion him. I am Russian, he said quickly. Tut, tut, tut. Tell that to others, said the officer, waving his finger before his nose and smiling. You shall tell me all about that presently. I am delighted to meet a compatriot. Well, and what are we to do with this man? He added, addressing himself to Pierre as to a brother. Even if Pierre were not a Frenchman, having once received that loftiest of human appellations he could not renounce it, said the officer's look and tone. In reply to his last question Pierre again explained who Makar Alexievich was and how just before their arrival that drunken imbecile had seized the loaded pistol which they had not had time to recover from him, and begged the officer to let the deed go unpunished. The Frenchman expanded his chest and made a majestic gesture with his arm. You have saved my life. You are French. You ask his pardon. I grant it you. Lead that man away, said he quickly and energetically, and taking the arm of Pierre whom he had promoted to be a Frenchman for saving his life, he went with him into the room. The soldiers in the yard, hearing the shot, came into the passage asking what had happened, and expressed their readiness to punish the culprits, but the officer sternly checked them. You will be called in when you are wanted, he said. The soldiers went out again, and the orderly, who had meanwhile had time to visit the kitchen, came up to his officer. Captain, there is soup and a leg of mutton in the kitchen, said he. Shall I serve them up? Yes, and some wine, answered the captain.